Okay, 12:30 on Wednesday. Welcome to webinar 11. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. For those of you who are new, welcome. Hopefully we'll have a bit of fun over the next hour. We'll learn a bit about Agile measurement, which is what we're going to be looking at here, measuring for success. From a team level, we're also going to have a look from a portfolio program level, and also have a look from a business transformation and organizational level. So what sorts of things would you look at in the context of business agility when measuring, and how would that be different to sort of standard business measures? As usual, I'll just wait a minute or two. Normally what happens is we get to 12:30 and then loads of people start arriving, which is what is happening at the moment. So I'll just wait a minute or two for people to catch up. As usual, quick weather report. Quick weather report of Kent in the UK. It's horrible. It's nice and warm. It's summer here, obviously August, it's summer. However, it's raining and windy and not very nice. Warm, rainy and windy, which is sort of like the standard UK summer, really. So, although saying that, we have had some really nice weather. Okay, so let's start driving forward then. I can see lots of people are now tagged in. So let's go in and have a look at some of the slides I'm planning to go through. So I'm just going to share the screen, going over here and start this up. Okay, so hello once again. Business agility, measuring for success. So yeah, apologies to those of you who have been here on quite a few of these webinars. As I say, this is webinar 11. All the previous 10 webinars are available on the RATAC YouTube channel. So you can have a look at those, some interesting stuff, business agility, everything to do with that really, agile leadership, all sorts of good stuff there. Yes, apologies to those of you who've been in previous webinars because you've seen me do this 10 times. But just to go through this quickly, so who am I? RATAC. RATAC is one of the leading worldwide agile transformation consultancies and provider of people and training, specifically in the agile space. So I was the chairman and founder of, well, I still am the chairman and founder of that, but I founded RATAC in '98. I personally started in the information technology industry in '83. Since then, since the early '90s, I've been specializing in lean, Kanban, agile, all those sorts of good stuff. So worked worldwide, consulting for organizations and also training organizations, certified in all sorts of different stuff that I won't bore you with. A few of the things there that I'm certified in. I used to be a director of a non-for-profit called the DSGM Consortium. That's now known as the Agile Business Consortium. Used to be a director of those folks. I wrote the book with some other great people called Agile Foundations, Principles, Practices and Frameworks. That sold about 4,500 copies last time I looked, about 6 months ago, which makes it one of the best-selling Agile books. That was with the British Computer Society. Fellow of the Agile Business Consortium, and also I also used to be an ex-adjunct professor of Agile Project Management at Hull University. That's not a real professor, by the way. That's a lecturer. But we used to be called adjunct professors. So just a brief overview of myself. And what we're going to be looking at today is this really, measuring for success. So why business agility? Go through that very quickly. Why measure at all? You know, there are arguments on both sides of the fence whether you should or shouldn't measure things within a business. So we'll have a look at those arguments. How to measure. So some thoughts about that. Then, as I was saying, have a look at team level measurements, portfolio and program level measurements, and organizational and transformational level measurements. So that's really the core of what we're going to be doing today. I'm on holiday for through a lot of September. So the next session, the next 3-hour, 1-hour webinar is going to be on the 22nd of September. That'll be about specifically transforming to business agility. So thinking about how to transform organizations, transform businesses to operate in the way we've been talking about over the last 11 webinars. And then on the 6th of October, Agile HR and the new world of resourcing. I can see, you know, post COVID-19, the way organizations actually resource themselves, the way people actually work is going to be very different. So I'm going to be talking there from an agile perspective about that. So yeah, so why business agility? Again, apologies to those of you who've seen me do these webinars before. You've seen me go through this many times, so I'm not planning to spend a huge amount of time on this. If anyone is new to this webinar series and they want to understand a lot more about why business agility and what it is, then the first 3 or 4 webinars was specifically about that. So you can see those on the YouTube channel, 3 or 4 hours talking specifically about that. But one of the key reasons that we need agility in business nowadays is it's a VUCA world. So what does that mean? Well, it means the world nowadays is very volatile. The rate of change is huge. uncertain. We don't really know what's going on, especially, you know, in the COVID-19 nightmare. We don't really know what's going to be going on possibly in the next week, certainly not in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year or whatever, because markets are very, very volatile. Complex, yeah, there's lots of decision factors we need to take into place, and ambiguous, lack of clarity. So, you know, we need to be thinking about perhaps more a probabilistic view of planning and estimating rather than a deterministic view. So we'll have a look at what I just said there in a bit more detail in a few minutes, because largely within an agile world, we're going to be using probabilistic measurement rather than deterministic measurement. So we'll have a look at what this means in the not too distant. Brilliant. Okay, so why measure at all? Just before we get here, what I'd like to do is you can see on your Zoom instances that you have the ability to chat. So you can just check out that chat function, and what you want is the chat function set to all panelists and attendees. So I'm just typing in hi. If you can just go into that chat function and just type something in, so I know that most of you know how to use it. So just to reiterate, set it to all panelists and attendees, and then just make a chat comment, because I'm going to ask you to contribute a little bit later on. Fantastic. So I can see loads of people. Hello world. I can see loads of people saying hi, hello. Yeah, brilliant, fantastic stuff. If you don't want to chat, then that's absolutely no problem. But yeah, great stuff. Okay, so I can see most of you, or some of you anyway, have got on the chat. So that's great. Okay, so why measure at all? Funnily enough, I've just asked you to go on to chat, and the first thing I'd like to do is to ask you, what are the possible problems and risks with measuring things? So in your experience and in your opinion, what possible risks or issues are there with measuring anything? So if you can go on to chat, and if you can start to raise some stuff, that would be absolutely awesome. And I'll have a look at what you come up with, and then we'll talk about it. So yeah, are you measuring the right thing? Definitely. Alexander, lack of trust on the part of management. Yes, so measurements can certainly be seen as a lack of trust. We need to be careful of that one. Measuring the right thing. Yes, we'll talk about that. Consistency of metrics. Metrics become the target. Yes, so in other words, it's more of a deterministic type approach than probabilistic. Yep. People get very conscious of the measures, Dina. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, we only focus on doing that which the measures measure. Yeah. Reductive from Connie. Yeah, great stuff. Fails to take into account the whole picture. Certainly. Yeah. Judy, comparing measures that might not be equal. Certainly. Velocity is a classic example of that we'll have a look at a little bit later. Catherine, focus on the metrics, not the solution. Yeah. Yeah. I think you've got a good list here of the sorts of risks associated with measuring in any world, you know, whether that be a business utility world or you know, a more traditional world. Yeah, so I'll put a few here, the sorts of things you were just raising there. So yeah, the issues and risks with measurement, focus on comparing to the past rather than looking to the future. So, you know, our measurements are only about saying, well, we did this in the past, what are we doing now? So, you know, we did this in the past, we want to be 5% better. Hey, well, what about the paradigm shift? What about going into a new market? What about thinking about totally fundamentally new products and services? You know, being innovative, creative. So there's a risk there. Focus inward rather than outward. And what I mean by that is sometimes organizations can become very inwardly focused. All their measures are very inwardly focused. Are we doing this effectively? Have we got resources utilized 100%? You know, these sorts of things. Well, really, what we need to be doing is making sure that we're focusing on the customer, because it's all about the customer. Or is it? Or is it? Well, the customer certainly is absolutely key, but we do need to make sure that, you know, we can have very, very happy customers by spending £10,000 on every interaction with them, but we'd go out of business next week. So, you know, it is all about the customer, but we need to be careful about, you know, measuring other things as well. But we don't want to just be inward focused, we want to be inward and outward. Yeah, the interesting quote here, lies, damned lies, and statistics. I think whenever we measure anything, we need to have that one in our mind. And interestingly, that is attributed to hundreds of people, Mark Twain, Disraeli, Balfour, Lord Balfour, etc., etc. So quite interesting that something that says lies, damned lies, and statistics, there doesn't seem to be an actual single person that's attributed to. But it is key that we remember that measures are just measures. They're just giving us an indication that some things are going possibly well, or maybe it's not going so well, and maybe we need to do something about it. You know, a classic example of where this is forgotten is where people talk about Gemba walks, a concept from Lean, Gemba walks. Gemba, if you want to understand more about this, Gemba walks. So sometimes people define Gemba walks as management by walking around. It's not management by walking around. A Gemba walk, as the name would suggest, is we're going to go and see in the organization where there might be an issue or a problem, which has been highlighted to us by our measures, but we then do something about it. That's the point of Gemba, sort of a continuous improvement. Metrics are gained at every management level. Yeah, that's certainly an issue I've seen over the last 30, 40 years, that every management level wants to add their two penneth into the measures. So by the time it gets to the senior management level, you're not totally sure what you're looking at. So yeah, that's a risk with doing this sort of stuff. You manage what you measure. So in other words, we're going to measure our productivity, we're going to measure our XYZ, but are we actually producing the right products? So, we might be producing the product right, but are we producing the right products? Or alternatively, we might be producing the right products, but are we producing them right? So we need to make sure that, we have measurements in place, but we also need to make sure that we're focusing not just on what the measurements tell us. We do need to be innovative and creative, especially in a VUCA world where everything's changing all the time. The implication of that is our measures will change consistently as well. Metrics drive behavior. Well, are they the right behaviors? Are the metrics we have in place, are they driving the behaviors we want in our organization to help us achieve what we want to achieve? So that's an absolutely key question, especially when you're talking about what's sometimes called middle management. You can be pretty confident that middle management are going to focus on that which their area of the business is being measured on. So we need to be cognizant and careful of that scenario. And the last one I've got here, and by the way, this is nowhere near an exhaustive list of the sorts of risks associated with measuring. And the last one here is it can get really big and really complex really quick. Sadly, I've seen many scenarios where we start to measure things and it just totally runs out of control. I remember a classic example of that, and I won't mention which hospital it is or which health trust it was. This happened probably about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe a bit longer. This primary health trust basically said to the government, look, we just haven't got the resources that we need to do what we need to do. So you're asking us to measure stuff, and that's taking more of our resources. Look, we need more resources. If we don't have more resources, this is going to fall over in a big heap. Our trust will fall over in a big heap. About 4 or 5 years later, the trust fell over in a big heap. And the response from the government was, holy crap, this trust has fallen over in a big heap. This must be down to the fact that we're not measuring the right things, we're not measuring enough. What we need to do is put loads more measures on this trust. It was the measurements, the fact that the trust was having to do the measurements in the first place that was causing the fundamental problem. So we just need to be careful with measurement. However, does that mean measurement is bad? So again, over to you on the old chat again. What are the benefits of measuring? What are the benefits of measuring? Why should we do this sort of thing? So I'm just going to go to the chat again, and if you'd be kind enough to raise in chat your thoughts on this. What's a good idea? Yeah, measuring is an opportunity for development, definitely. Continuous improvement, yes, absolutely. What other things do you think? What else makes measurement a good thing to do? So I'll just see if anybody else here about. Yep, Judy, if used well, supports continuous improvement, definitely. Catherine, yeah, it's a good starting point indicator of where you are on the journey, definitely. Christina, helps us forecast, definitely, yeah, it helps us forecast a bit. Our forecasting is going to be probabilistic, but yeah, certainly looking into the past to predict the future, we'll definitely do that. That's what velocities are all about. Indication that we're not going in the right direction. Yeah, great stuff. All right, good. Okay, so we can see the benefits here. Just remembering, lies, downlights, and statistics. Measurements are not the be all and end all. Common understanding of the focus from Dina, helps to support business cases from Judy. Yeah, all great stuff. So thank you very much once again. Brilliant stuff. Let's have a look at a few things I came up with. Stops facts. Danger. What is a fact? Depends on the environment, etc. But anyway, stops facts getting superseded by anecdotal evidence and hearsay. Welcome to 2020, folks. I think perhaps we see quite often with the birth of social media, etc. You people who've studied many years to get their degree in XYZ or their doctorate or their professorship or whatever it is, and then somebody else says, well, it says this on the internet, therefore it must be true. So yeah, there are benefits with measuring things. So in other words, empirical evidence. at what's actually being said, and the direction we're going is based on empirical evidence. That's one of the big benefits of measurement. Yeah, and feeds empirical decision making at all levels. So yes, Agile is very empirical. Agile is based on the pillars of empiricism: inspect, adapt, and transparency. So it's very much based on that. And the idea in Agile is we're going to make decisions, but we want to make decisions where we have some observable facts upon which to base those decisions, rather than a more traditional way of thinking, a more traditional business that will do a huge amount of analysis and design up front before developing anything. They haven't really got any observable facts for how that product or outcome is actually going to work. So yes, we certainly want to make sure we measure things, and it's going to feed that empirical decision making. So in other words, in Agile, an example, we measure that we're delivering the right outcomes, products at the right time in the right way, and then continuously improve from there. Continuously improve the product, and continuously improve the way we're delivering the product. Moneyball is quite a good one. Some of you might have heard of a film called Moneyball, Brad Pitt, available on Netflix and other suppliers. So yeah, Moneyball is a story of a baseball team called the Oakland A's. What the Oakland A's did was they had nowhere near as much money as the really big baseball teams in the US. So they had to find a different way to get benefit. And the way they did that was they started measuring in a huge amount of detail all sorts of pluses and minuses about the players. And sometimes some of the bigger baseball organizations didn't want to take on a player because the feeling in the market was that perhaps they weren't good at this. Well, the Oakland A's created a load of empirical evidence and said, this person's good at this, good at this, bad at this, good at this, good at this, good at this. And therefore people put people in place. And they won their division. But where they won their division with a budget that was hugely less than everyone else. So it's a good story of where measurement does give a benefit. You could argue without measures, we're just guessing. Yes, if we haven't got the empirical evidence, I would agree with that. Yes, if we haven't got empirical evidence. How would we know what we're doing is working? We don't have any sort of measure on it. Yeah, certainly. Excuse me. Same point I made on the disbenefits. Metrics drive behavior. Are they the right behaviors? So we do, in a VUCA world, very much need to be looking at our measures continuously and improving the measures as we improve the business. And also we're going to have objectives, objective key results we'll have a look at a little bit later, OKRs. Yeah, we want measurable objectives. We want to have the ability that any objective in the organization must be measurable. If it's not measurable, why have the objective? Because you haven't got the faintest idea whether you're actually able to achieve it or not. So yeah, we looked at some disbenefits and some benefits there. How to measure? Well, I'm just going to look at a very high level here. So a high level thought about how to measure. Actually, before I do that, let's ask you a question again. So going on to chat again, if you wouldn't mind. Why and how does measurement differ for the Agile business? So thinking about the Agile business and the traditional business, what would be different in the Agile business? So once again, over onto chat for you folks to any comments you can think of. Yeah, Catherine, great film. Yeah, I thought Moneyball was really good. It's quite funny as well. So yeah, it's a good film. So why and how does Agile measurement? First, we need to know what we're measuring for. Yeah, Alexander, definitely. Relative estimation versus absolute. Yes. So again, velocity is about relative estimation. Story points is about relative estimation. Judy, yeah. Jasbir, change is more in a VUCA world, certainly. So we need to make sure that we're not just measuring against the past, because the past may not be a very good predictor of the future. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Or if we are going to measure in the past, then not a huge amount of distance in the past. Timelines and projected forecasts differ. Yeah, so we need changing them all the time. Yeah, good stuff. So yes, we're getting good stuff, and it's leading us to the point that we mentioned before: deterministic versus probabilistic. So deterministic basically means the outcome is predefined based on initial state and inputs. So in other words, an automated production line, if you had the same inputs and you turned on the production line, you would get the same outputs. Probabilistic, there's a wide range of outcomes. Each forecast has a range and a probability. So that's much more like a human system. That's much more like a business, especially a business in the VUCA world. So, are all of our measurements probabilistic in Agile? No, some are deterministic. But certainly there is a focus on probabilistic measurement. So an example of that I've got on the right-hand side of this slide is what's called Boehm's cone of uncertainty. Haven't got time to go through this in detail. Boehm, B-O-E-H-M, Boehm's cone of uncertainty. I would suggest have a look at it. It's how we estimate in the Agile world. And it's putting a concept over that basically your estimate, the accuracy of your estimate will vary depending on how much you know about that which you're estimating. Now that sounds very, very obvious, sounds very, very obvious. However, many organizations don't think like that. When they actually forecast, they do it in a deterministic way. If we have these inputs, that means this, and we will definitely get this product to this level of quality on this time to this cost. That's deterministic. We don't think like that within the Agile world. We're thinking about the probability of that occurring based on lots of different variables, and then what we're doing is we're measuring those variables. Yes, so we've got a good idea what's going on. So on Boehm's kernel of uncertainty, you would typically use 3-point estimates. So based on our knowledge at this time, this is what we think is going to happen. This is the most that's likely to happen. This is the least that's likely to happen. And we see this expressed in things like Burnup charts that we'll have a look at a little bit later on. So yeah, how do we measure? Largely probabilistically. The basics, the absolute basics of Agile Lean measurement, the real fundamental things we would be measuring are these. This is from a good book in the Agile world, Lean book, called Lean Software Development, where basically Mary and Tom Poppendick apply the thinking of Lean. I'm sure some of you will have heard of Lean, really into the software development world. So if you are from the software development world, that's a good book to read. If you're from the business world, I would suggest you need to make yourself aware of Lean. So the basics, value. Good luck with that one. Value. Yeah, that's a big subject on its own, and I might actually do we could do a 2-day course on value at least. But I might do a webinar later on talking specifically about value. Different industries look at value in different ways, and there's loads of different ways to measure value. I typically try and keep it quite simple. And I'll talk to a group of stakeholders and basically say, okay, 1 to 10, 1 is low value, 10 is high value. Where are we against some parameters? But value, we need to be measuring, are we delivering value? Speed to delivering value, this is known as lead time. There's 2 concepts that we'll have a look at a little bit later on that we should be measuring. One is called cycle time and one is called lead time. Sometimes people get a bit confused about the differences between cycle time and lead time. It's actually very, very straightforward. It's very, very straightforward. Cycle time is the time from the point it comes into the system to the time it goes out of the system. So in other words, if you have a development team who are developing a new marketing strategy, let's say, for example, the time that comes in and the time it comes out, that's the cycle time. Now, the lead time is different. The lead time would also include the time to the point it's delivered. So in other words, if you, from a production line, produced a product, so it comes into the production line, goes out of the production line, that's your cycle time, and then the product takes a further 4 weeks before it's actually live, before it's actually the values deployed, that's the lead time. So the lead time is the point to live. The cycle time is the time it takes to go through the whatever system it is you're looking at. So we really need to be looking at the lead time. The basic measure is the lead time. How fast are we delivering that value? And is that appropriate speed? I would also recommend, although I'm not planning to go through it in detail, have a look at something called takt time, T-A-K-T. Takt time at a very, very high level, using a production line example again, there is no point just churning 8 gazillion things out of a production line or out of a business or out of a team in a business if the business or the customer isn't able to consume it. So simple example, we have a production line. The customer wants 5 units a week. However, we're producing 5,000 units a week. Well, that's not going to be very good. Or alternatively, the customer wants 5,000 units a week and we're producing 5. Again, that's not very good. So takt time is about looking at that. Are we actually aligned to the consumption speed of our customer or the market or the business or whatever it is? So it's another good thing to look at. But the basic thing is the lead time. How long does it take us from idea to delivery of value? That's the real key one. And the last one here is customer satisfaction, which we'll have a look at. We'll have a look at some measures, thinking about how to measure customer satisfaction a little bit later on. So the basic lean and agile measures. So let's have a look at some team level measurements, the sorts of things that you would normally be focusing on within an agile team. Remember here, we are talking about business agility, not agile within IT. Yes. I'm going to use 1 or 2 IT examples, but all of the things I'm going to be looking at here are as applicable to an HR team, marketing team, IT team, the whole business, everything. Yes. So this isn't just about IT stuff. I'm only going to be looking at the key stuff here. There's lots more than this key stuff that you might consider. So just before we get in here, again, just to a bit of input from you, if you wouldn't mind. What team level measurement tools, techniques have you used and respect or like? There's the sorts of things that you've looked at previously. So if I just go into chat again, if you'd be kind enough to just put some stuff in there, that would be absolutely fantastic. So what team level measurements have you actually used before and have worked well for you? Surveys, yeah, certainly surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, for example. There's two types of customer satisfaction we'll look at a little bit later on, both of which are survey driven. Burnup charts, yes, excellent, yep. Good way of looking at, are we likely to hit something within the time frame that we were, well, normally it's, are we likely to deliver what we thought we would within the sprint? So giving us an indication of that, yes. Cumulative flow diagrams, we'll have a look at those, yes, fantastic. Agile maturity assessments, certainly when you're thinking about transformation, yeah. Lean wastes, yeah, we'll have a look at those. Cumulative flow diagrams or CFDs. Quality charts, yep. Burnups, burndowns, all that sort of good stuff, yeah. So again, we're getting some great input, yeah. So funnily enough, all of those things you've mentioned on there, we'll be having a look at in the next few slides. Tickets per sprint as a planning metric when story points aren't available. Yep, certainly story points is just one way of measuring throughput. There are other ways of doing that, and what Cameron suggested is another way of measuring throughput, and throughput is a key thing we need to be looking at. From Dina, bug tracking, yet certainly we need to be looking at, how many bugs are coming in, how many bugs are we fixing, how many bugs are left, is the amount of bugs going down. A very typical example of technical debt, or where we have too much technical debt, when we're starting to track the bugs go up and they keep going up. Well, that probably suggesting to us we've got a lot of technical debt within whatever it is we're creating, so that as we've created something that works functionally, but it doesn't work well technically. So there's lots of bugs and errors in it. So that's giving us a good indication there, possibly, that we've got too high technical debt. Value delivered, certainly. How much value have we delivered from the perspective of the people who are getting that value? So yeah, great stuff. Once again, brilliant. Thank you very much. Good stuff. So let's have a look at some of these things. So the first one I'd like to have a look at is the burn down chart. So I'm just going to go onto my sketch pad, and we'll just draw up a little bit of information about burn down. Well, we're going to look at the burn down and burn up. So I'll just go onto the sketch pad. Just bear with me a minute. Just going to share a screen over here and over here. So we're on the sketch pad now. So let's have a look at the burn up and burn down charts. Let's look at the burn up chart first, because these are well, they're both mega useful, but these are really, really useful from a business perspective. Burn up charts are really, really useful from a business perspective. So burn up chart, you would normally be looking over a period of time that's normally associated with a program increment. So, a program increment is a vehicle by which the business can look into the future, a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever makes sense. Let's assume in this particular example that we're looking 3 months into the future, let's say. Let's 6 2-week sprints, in other words. So let's say that's sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, sprint 5, sprint 6. Obviously, the more VUCA the environment you are within, the more you look into the future, the more what you're predicting here will be fundamentally incorrect. So you do need to think about how much you would look into the future. But every business I've ever worked with, and certainly Radtac, which is a multi-million-pound international business that I set up, you need to look into the future over a period of time. So on the bottom of the burn-up chart, we've got time. In this situation, time in sprint. Up here, we would have some sort of measure of throughput. Story points is quite a typical one. So let's say that's 100 story points. Let's say that's 200, 300 perhaps, 400, 500, 600, whatever, something like this. One thing I would suggest to you in the real world is, and I haven't got time to go through this in detail, but story points are just a relative estimation approach. They are exactly the same as relative t-shirt sizes. The only difference with story points is you put a number on the relative t-shirt size. So they're a relative estimation approach. Now, story points can be extremely confusing for people. Therefore, what I'd strongly suggest to you, if you're going to use a burn-up chart, don't communicate story points outside the team, because you're running a risk it will significantly confuse people. What I would suggest to you is, here's your product backlog. So your product backlog is defining what you're going to do and the order you're going to do it in. Here are our items, our product backlog items, PBIs, stories, defects, that sort of thing, product backlog items. And those product backlog items will be sized in story points or some other method. What we can do is, we know that much equals 100 story points. we know that that much equals 200 story points. So what I would suggest to you is, although on the Burnup chart you would use story points, don't communicate in story points outside the team. Yes, communicate outside the team in how much is being delivered. So let's have a look at what we can actually use Burnup charts for. Well, what we do over time is we start to hold an idea of what the throughput is. So in this case, velocity. So we start to hold a velocity line. Now, doing this, we can actually start to create a trend. So it looks like, based on factual empirical evidence, that the team delivers this fast. What we would then do is we would think about, okay, that's the team delivering that fast. We don't want to be deterministic, we want to be probabilistic. So thinking about probabilities, how likely is it that we'll hit that? So we start to put a cone of uncertainty around this. Now, obviously, if you've got a team who are very inexperienced, the cone of uncertainty is going to be very, very wide. If you have a team who are very experienced, the cone of uncertainty is going to be pretty narrow. Yeah, like this. Okay, so what can we then start to use the Burnup chart for? Well, we can start to create probabilistic predictions, and that's all they are, predictions, of what's likely to happen in the future. So for example, a business says to us, we must have this thing in place by the 1st of October. Now we know that the 1st of October is the end of sprint 3, yeah? Or they've asked the question, how much will we have in place? How much will we have in place by the 1st of October? So we can use the Burnup chart and we can say, okay, so looking at the Burnup chart, looking at the trend of delivery, it's likely that we'll have around 400 story points on the 1st of October based on factual evidence. The most we're likely to get is 500 story points, and the least we're likely to get is 300 story points. So we've done a probabilistic 3-point estimate there based on the trend of delivery, based on some factual empirical evidence. And that particular question was, what will we get by a certain date? Which, you know, customers are very typically asked those sorts of questions. Another thing we can do with the Burnup chart is the customer says, when will I get 600 story points of delivery? Yeah. So we can track across here and we can say, well, it looks like that would be likely in the middle of sprint 4. The earliest you are likely to get that is by the end, middle of sprint 5. The earliest you would get that is by the beginning of, and the latest you would get that is by the middle of sprint 6. So once again, we've answered the question here, which is, when can I have a certain amount of delivery? And we've looked at some factual evidence to help us describe that. Another thing which Burnup charts are really useful for is the customer says, we must have 400 story points of delivery by the end of sprint 2. Well, that lies outside the cone of uncertainty, so it's unlikely to happen. So we can now start to have a conversation with the customer based on our measurements. We can say, look, looking at our empirical measurements, looking at the facts, we don't think we're going to be able to do that. What we will be able to do, or what we believe we will be able to do, is we could deliver that much, yeah, on at the end of sprint 2, or we could deliver all of this by the end of sprint 3. What would you like us to do? Would you like us to deliver this now and then deliver incrementally to you? Or would you like us to wait to this later date so where we can deliver everything to you? So Burnup charts are really, as a measure, they are really, really useful. They're really good business agility measures because it allows us to have a conversation with customers based on factual evidence. Okay, so those are Burnup charts. Burn down charts, let's have a look at these. There's lots of different ways to do burn down charts. You can do them on story points, you can do them on tasks, you can do them on days. I normally do all 3. I'll do a day-based burn down chart here, just run through this very, very, very quickly. So what does a burn down chart do for us? Well, these are normally related to sprints. Burn ups are normally related to program increments or looking into the future. Burn down charts are normally related to sprints. So let's say we've got 6 people in the team, and let's say those 6 people work 6-hour days. So we've got a 36-hour day, and let's say we've got 10 days in the sprint. So we have 360 hours available, let's say. Yeah, for the sake of argument. So 360 hours available. So 360 hours available to us. Here is day 1 of the sprint, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Now, what we're going to do on a burn down chart is we're going to compare actual effort left against planned effort left. Now, this is the key point. It's about effort left. It's not about effort spent. It's about effort left. This is what burn down charts, story points left. This is what burn down charts look at. So after 1 day, theoretically, if everything's going wonderful, we should have 360 minus 36 effort left. So he should have 324 hours of effort left. So let's have a look at this. So let's say good old Fred, who is one of the people in the team who's developing our new marketing campaign or our HR system or whatever it is. Good old Fred, who's creating this particular product or outcome. When the team did their sprint planning, they self-organised to agree that Fred was going to be doing task A, and task A Fred sized at 10 hours. So Fred sized task A at 10 hours. By the way, some teams do this level of estimation, hour-based, some don't. I won't go into the detail of that. Some do and some don't. If you're going to use an hour-based burn down chart, then obviously you need to have this based in hours. So Fred said it would take 10 hours. So on day one, so here's day one and day two, Fred starts to do task A. And at the end of day one, he's going to put in the effort left, not the effort spent. He's going to put in what he thinks is the effort left. So he says, I've spent 6 hours on this, and I now reckon there's 4 hours left. So the sort of thing you would put into Jira, Agile, or whatever tool you're using, yeah, Rally or whatever, sort of thing you put into that tool. So he's saying he's done 6 hours work, there's 4 hours left. Well, that makes sense, yeah. 10-hour original estimate, 4 hours left. That would suggest to us that everything's going wondrously. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned there would be a planned effort line going down like this, which is, you know, if we're on target, we will be on the planned effort line. So Fred has spent 6 hours, 4 hours left. That looks like we're on target. So everything's tickety-boo. However, on day two, Fred starts once again on this task A, and something blows up in his face, and he's now saying there are 15 hours left. Oh, okay. So that means that actual effort line is going to start to track away from the planned effort line. So this is giving us an indication that we've got a problem, an indication that we have a problem. Yeah. Remember, liars, analysis, and statistics, measurements are only indications that something might be problematic. Excuse me. So in this scenario, it's giving us an indication that we might not be able to deliver everything we thought we could deliver. Now, you can put a line on a burn down chart, and as long as your trend of delivery cuts the line of the sprint goal prior to the end of the sprint, that is showing you that you're likely to hit the sprint goal. However, if that line cut, after the end of the sprint, that's suggesting to you could not hit the sprint goal. And when I say suggesting to you, I mean suggesting to the development team, Scrum Master and Product Owner. So that would suggest, you know, we need to do something. We need to do something about this. So burn down charts are really, really useful for sprints, and they're really, really useful to help us identify, hey, look, is it likely we're going to have a problem in the delivery of this sprint, hitting the sprint goal? Burnup charts are really, really useful from a business perspective, thinking about, you know, when businesses ask questions like, what can I have on this date? Or alternatively, how much can we get delivered? Those sorts of questions. So let's stop share. We've had a look at burn up and burn down charts there. Let's go back into the slides. So here's our burn down chart. So we can see there the predicted line, ideal task remaining, and then the actual task remaining in the red line there. So I would normally do this, as I was saying, in days, like this chart does. I would also do it in story points. I would also do it in tasks. So I would normally have 3 burn down charts. There's our burn up chart, as we've just discussed. So what other measures, team-based measures, would we typically have in place? Cumulative flow diagrams, excuse me. So cumulative flow diagrams. Cumulative flow diagrams are really useful for showing us the work in progress. So WIP, or work in progress, is definitely something that we would be having a look at. What a cumulative flow diagram is going to show us is, and we look at the one on the left-hand side here, the statuses done, obviously delivered, ready to deliver, ready for review, follow-up, and waiting. Yes, these are different statuses for how the team works. So these are the statuses that the team works to. What we can see here is we start to see how's the flow going, how are we actually flowing work, and in essence, where you see the green, red, yellow, purple lines start to get very wide, that's when we've got a bit of a problem. So something is going wrong. So cumulative flow diagram is showing us what sort of flow do we have. So for example, looking at the left-hand diagram again, we can see we've got 4 tasks in process there. And for the 4 tasks in process, or work in progress, sorry, that's giving us a 7-day average cycle time. Yeah, so 4 tasks, 7 days average cycle time. So cumulative flow diagrams, yep, definitely a good thing to have a look at. it's one way of monitoring our work in progress. Another thing we should be looking at with work in progress is we should be thinking about the age of tasks that are in the work in progress. Obviously, if tasks become very, very old, that's suggesting to us that something's going very, very wrong. In other words, if something's got a blocker against it and it's just not being done, then we've got a problem. So there's two ways, there's numerous ways to look at this, but here's two different charts we can look at. Again, the left-hand one here is saying analysis active, analysis done, analysis, development active, development done, testing, and then done, as in we've completed the cycle time, we're now done. So this chart is helping us identify what elements do we have, what tasks do we have, what is the age of the things we have in place at the moment. So if we look at analysis done, for example, we can see we've got two items there which are around 5 days. We've got one that's around 15 and one that's 20. Yeah, so we're really exceeding our targets on those ones. If we look at testing, we can see there we've got 5 elements that are within the 70 and 85% percentile of what we're aiming for. So yeah, it's identifying there's the problem. Another way of looking at aging is this diagram down the bottom here. Again, we can start to see, excuse me, we can start to see how many items we have in play and how old they are. Obviously, we want most items to be around the green sort of level, 0 to 7 days or 7 to 14 days. But we can see here on the April to 23rd, we've got a huge amount of stuff that's 14 to 28 or over 28 days. So obviously, that's identifying to us we've got a problem. So it's a good it's a good measure to think about. Not only what's your flow, what's your work in progress, and what's your flow, but what's the age of the thing age of the tasks within work in progress. So flow, we've mentioned flow. Another good thing to have a look at. Another good thing to have a look at. Just bear with me a second. I've just turned the lights off. Don't. Another good thing to have a look at is to have an understanding of what's called Little's law, which is thinking about queues, thinking about the flow, optimizing flow, throughput. So Little's law is basically average number of items in a system equals the average arrival rate times the average wait time in the system for an item. So looking at Little's law in Starbucks, for example, hopefully nice, nice easy example. Minutes until I get coffee, getting coffee, is basically going to be equal to number of people in line over people served per minute. So if there's 11 people in line, yes, and it takes 1 minute for each of those people to be served, then obviously it's going to take 11 minutes to get the coffee. Yeah. So it's a way of measuring the flow. Little's law is a way of measuring the flow. So we can also restrict the work in progress to optimize the flow. Now, I haven't got time to take you through that in this short measurement-focused webinar, but suffice to say, we need to be thinking about how much we have in work in progress, because if we have lots and lots of things in work in progress, that's going to create a huge amount of noise and interruptions within a team, and our flow is going to be not good. A simple example of this restricting work in progress to optimize flow is the cameras that you see on motorways, and the speed restriction signs. What they're doing there is they have an algorithm by which they know the greatest flow, what creates the greatest flow of vehicles across this motorway junction and that motorway junction. So they have an algorithm that helps them define that, distance between traffic, speed of traffic, amount of cars, etc., etc. So based on that algorithm, what happens is a speed restriction sign flashes up, and they're restricting the speed of the traffic to optimize the flow. So in other words, they're restricting the work in progress to optimize the flow. So that's a simple example of this. We should be looking in Agile at this. So, what's happening via the work in progress, the queues, and we should be focusing via those measures on optimizing the flow. And certainly when we look at flow, we need to be thinking about waste and its impact. So I'm just going to draw a very quick diagram again. We haven't got a huge amount of time left, but I'm just going to draw a very, very quick diagram for another thing we should be looking at, which is related to value chains, and it's related to lead time and work time. So let's just have a look at this. So bear with me. There we go. Okay, so let's just have a little bit of thinking about this. So we should be measuring, we should be looking at our value chains. Now again, value chain analysis is a subject that can get really complex really quick. So I'm going to just look at the simple version here. So this is a customer who wants something. So this is something coming into our system. Here's the customer getting something. Yeah. So this is the lead time from the point that the customer says they want something to the point they get it, which is different to the cycle time. The cycle time is how long it takes us to cycle to deliver something out of the system. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going live. That's the lead time. So looking at our system, we have, let's say, 4 things that we do. So here's the 4 things that we do to deliver something. Now, if we look at the work time, it might take us a day to do that first part of the process, let's say, first part of the value chain, 2 days to do that, 1 day to do that, and 1 day to do that. So the work time for what we're doing here is 5 days. So there's a 5-day work time for what we need to do here. Yeah. However, when we look at the lead time, because we don't have the appropriate level of empowerment, it takes us 5 days to actually get approval to start this work. Then we've done the first step. We now need to go to the legal team to get legal approval. It takes 10 days to get legal approval. We now need to go off and get some more approval from somewhere. That takes 5 days. We need to get some more approval because the empowerment's at the wrong level. So that takes us 10 days. And then it takes us 10 days to actually deliver something, get it approved for delivery out to the organization. So your work time is 5 days. But in this scenario, because one of the wastes of lean is what's called wait time, and what causes wait time a lot is the wrong level of empowerment, wait time, the wrong level of empowerment. So we're having to wait a lot. In this situation, this waste, one of the 7 wastes, wait time, it means that the work time is 5 days, but the lead time is 5 plus 1, 6, plus 10, 16, plus 2, 18, plus 5, 23, 24, 34, 35, 45. The lead time is 45 days. That's insane. That's not unusual. Yeah. So these are one of the things that we need to be measuring. That's a very simple and quick overview through what I mean here. But yeah, we need to be looking at the difference between the work time and the lead time. Very, very important. One of the key measures we would be looking at in any team. Remember, we're talking here about business agility, not specifically, in information technology. So yeah, I talked there about waste number 5, wait time. Monitoring wait time. There's all sorts of other things we should be looking at as well. So all sorts of lean wastes that we should be measuring. So flow efficiency. Flow efficiency measures the percentage of total lead time spent actually adding the value versus the waiting. So there we've just talked about the lead time. We've talked about doing the process and having to wait. Flow efficiencies of 1 to 5% are commonly reported, as I was suggesting. Yeah, 40% is pretty good. So we need to be measuring this sort of stuff. It's absolutely key in any team. Throughput, I've mentioned. There's lots of different ways to measure throughput. One way to measure throughput is something called a velocity. So the way we define a velocity is by taking an average of story points. One way to do this, take an average of story points across sprints. So let's say we had one sprint that was 30 story point delivery. So, looking in the past, we delivered 30 points from one sprint. We delivered 35 story points from the next sprint, and we delivered 25 from the next sprint. So on average, 30 plus 25 plus 35. On average, that's suggesting to us that the velocity of this team is 30 story points per sprint. Yeah, 30 story points per 2-week period of time. So yes, we could look at throughput that way. And then looking at our diagram on the right here from scrumming, we could be thinking about, well, is our velocity increasing? Be careful, by the way, when having this sort of measure in place, measuring output improvement with velocity, be careful, because the team might actually start to size things, taking into account that they believe they can now produce them faster. So in other words, in that situation, what they previously had sized at 13 story points, let's say, they are now sizing at 2 story points. In that situation, the velocity would not go up. All right, so just be careful if you use this. But yeah, tracking velocity over time is generally a good thing to do. But like everything else, be aware of what you're actually measuring. You could also look at throughput as what items have been delivered, what separate stories have been delivered. Don't think about the size of the items. So the diagram on our bottom left here, the one with the dots on is looking at what we've actually done over time, and then the green one is looking at average what's happening. So hopefully you would see that going up. Again, it's just a simplistic measure though, because we're not taking into account size. So we need to think about some sort of measures here about throughput. That's going to be absolutely key. Cycle time I've sort of talked about, and I've put a definition there if any of you decide to watch the video a little bit later on. put a definition there of lead time and cycle time. So the sort of things we're looking at here, one from an organization called Actionable Agile, which is a damn good book to read, by the way. Actionable Agile. This is called a cycle time scatter graph. So what we're looking at here is they've actually looked at 305 separate work items in this particular team, and they've looked at the cycle time. So, you know, they can see 50% of items here occur within a cycle time of 7 days. Sounds good. Yeah. 70% have got 12 days or less. 85% has got 16 days or less, etc., etc. So it's starting to give you a view of looking at the items that we're actually delivering. What is our average cycle time? Because obviously we're going to be aiming to decrease that cycle time. We want to get throughput to be much more effective. So these are two good measures, or two different ways of looking at measuring cycle time. So yes, either a cycle time scatter graph, or this sort of approach where you look more at the rolling average, yeah, and then look at the standard deviation between the average and the rolling average. Yeah. Obviously, we want that standard deviation to be as small as possible. We want to be, you know, pretty near, either exceeding the average or pretty near the average. By the way, the more you can make the cycle time average, the more predictable it comes. Yeah, so it's you know, it's a really key measure within any team. We want to create an average cycle time to get predictability. Obviously, value delivered is probably one that we all focus on. Again, good luck with defining exactly what value means. But yeah, so typically, if we looked at risk versus value, for example, as the value goes up week over week, as we produce valuable things, that will probably tail off over time as we start to, you know, we've got the key things in place. But as we deliver value, the risk will go down. The risk will hopefully go down. Yes. So, you know, there's some good charts we can use. This one's a value risk chart. There's good charts we can use thinking about value. Is it actually going in the right direction? And is what we are expecting to happen happening? Cost of delay. Sadly, I haven't got time to run this particular thing. Cost of delay. This is a good 5-minute overview from an organisation called Black Swan Farming. Black Swan Farming. I would suggest you go onto the internet, search for cost of delay Black Swan Farming, and you'll find a 5-minute overview of what cost of delay is. It's another really key thing that we need to monitor. The cost of delay is talking about what is the cost of delaying one thing as opposed to the cost of delaying another thing. So, for example, if I had blue pen and green pen, simplistically, if I just looked at cost and effort, if that is going to take a week to develop and give us £10,000 benefit, so a week and £10,000, that's 2 weeks and £10,000. Which would you do first? Well, a week and £10,000. If that gave us £10,000 benefit and takes 2 weeks, that gives us £20,000 benefit and takes 2 weeks. Which would you do first? Well, that one. Yeah. So measuring cost of delay really helps us focus on value and speed. It really helps us focus on prioritization, yeah, based on value and speed, and it helps us understand what actually is the cost of not doing this thing. So it's a very important measure that we need to be looking at. Okay, good stuff. Other metrics, I've used an information technology example here. So other metrics, possibly test coverage. Yeah, we might be measuring that. Technical debt. Yeah, as we've said before, the amount of bugs we've got is going to be an indication of technical debt. Build time, code churn, code complexity, all sorts of different things you might look at. The sorts of things I've looked at here, there's a good game called the GetKanban Game. This game basically has within it lots of Kanban related charts, lots of lean related charts and measures. So I would suggest have a look at the GetKanban Game. It does cost, you know, when you look at it initially, you think, I can't remember the cost off the top of my head, but $300 or whatever it is, you think, whoa, $300 for a board game. But, you know, it is really useful. If any of you on the webinar are coaches, I would suggest get the GetKanban Game and think about using it with your organizations. So I'm going to be looking at some portfolio and program level measures here. This is just again really a quick run through. Epic and release burndowns is typically something you would look at the portfolio and program level. So what we're seeing here on the left-hand chart is here's our original estimate: 15 weeks, 15 days, whatever it is, 15 story points, whatever it is. We reckon to do this particular epic. In sprint 7, we've actually completed 2 of those 2 story points, let's say. So there's 13 left. In Sprint 8, we've actually added 4 on. So we can see here +4. Yeah, so we've now got 17 things to do. And then in Sprint 9, we add another 4 things on. Yes, but we've completed 3, etc., etc. So it's just a nice, easy way to see what progress are we making against this particular epic. Another way to look at it is the diagram on the right here. So story points, rather than having this plus or minus, as we saw on the left, basically progress is shown above the baseline, i.e. the baseline is the 0 point, and change to scope is shown below the baseline. So it's just giving us a good, a good quick indication sort of thing you'd see here. Release defect trend. Yeah, you'd certainly be looking at this. Oh, by the way, I should mention, a lot of what we looked at in the team-based measures, you would also be looking at the program and portfolio level. So you look at them across teams, basically. Not velocity, but look at them across teams. So release defect trend. Yep, this is a good one to look at, perhaps giving us an indication of, what's happening with the technical debt. Is the product we're producing, are we producing it the right way? Does it have the right level of technical excellence within it? So yes, we can see here cumulative opened defects. You can see a line going up there. Cumulative closed defects. We can see a line going up there that's steeper, which is a good thing. And then total active defects. So we can see here we had quite a high defect count when we started, but it's going down quite significantly by November. So yeah, this is the sort of thing you would aim for. So release defect trend is a really good thing to look at the release, well, all levels, but certainly at the release level. SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework. We looked at different scaling frameworks in webinar 7 or 8, I think it was, if I remember rightly. So if you want to see different scaling frameworks, have a look at that webinar that's on the RadTac YouTube channel. I just sort of pique your interest in some of the things SAFe looks at. So RadTac are a SAFe Gold partner. The other scaling frameworks are excellent as well. It's about choosing the framework that's right for you. But SAFe does have quite a lot of guidance about what to measure at this level, the portfolio and program level. So I'm not planning to go through this slide in detail, but these are the sorts of things that they're suggesting, has worked well across different enterprises, things like, net promoter scores, feature cycle time, this sort of good stuff. So yes, this is the sort of thing I would suggest you should have a look at. Within SAFe, you also have different assessments. Within RadTac, we have lots of these as well, sort of cultural assessments, etc. So based on questionnaires, you can start to assess, where are you from an organizational agility perspective? Where are you from a lean portfolio management perspective? Where are you from a continuous deployment perspective? So these are good things to do. And as I say, the SAFe ones are all available free to use. So pick the ones that make sense for you. So you can see this on the internet. So I would suggest have a look at this area. Program predictability, again, it's another good thing that SAFe does. Other scaling frameworks have these as well, but just using an example here for simplicity. Yep. So team performance reports that come in, you can then track those against the program predictability measures. So we can see here that Team B. Objectives achieved, Team B are pretty well within the band we want, 80 to 100%. So we want to achieve this amount of objectives from each program increment. So every 3 months or so, let's say, for sake of argument. So every 3 months, does the team achieve its objectives? Well, it looks like Team B broadly do. Team A, the red dotted line, well, not really. The end of PI1, program increment 1, they only achieved 30%. End of program increment 2, they achieved about 90%, which is great, but then it went down again. So something going wrong within Team A. Yep. So yeah, this is similar to the sorts of things that you used to see in balanced business scorecards, similar-ish, but it's about bringing everything together at this portfolio level. Brilliant. Let's move on and have a look at a little bit about transformation and business. Now, I'm not planning to look here at business basics such as return on investment, return on capital employed, sales pipeline. Those are the things you need to run any business, whether it's an agile business or a traditional business or whatever it is. What I'm planning to look at here is really more organizational and transformational type things. Now, I mentioned this objective key results. Yeah, I would suggest and make yourself aware of OKRs. The format they have is, I will objective achieve as measured by this set of key results. So it's making sure that all the objectives you have within the team or within the whole organization, the whole business or the program or whatever it is you're doing, it's making sure that all of those objectives are measurable. Yeah, it's the point I made right at the beginning of this webinar. You know, if we're not measuring stuff, how do we know whether we are achieving it or not? So yeah, I would strongly suggest you have a look at Objective Key Results. A couple of good books here. Measure What Matters by John Doerr, for example, is a good book to look at, and it talks about this in a bit more detail. So I also mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, you know, we're going to have deterministic and probabilistic. Largely in the Agile world, we're going to be looking at probabilistic type measures. However, we would normally have a very innovative and creative Agile element, business operating model within the business, but that we would also have efficiency and stability via the hierarchy of the business. Now, obviously, we don't want too much business hierarchy, but yeah, there could be some deterministic measures in there as well. So businesses for the fourth industrial revolution are likely to be a combination of highly innovative and creative Agile elements of the business and more traditional, efficient and stable. I mean, Agile is incredibly efficient and stable as well, by the way. Don't get the wrong message there. But you know, some more traditional hierarchical elements of the business as well. So yes, we need to be aware of that. Measures. Customer satisfaction. I think, if I remember right, this is the last main thing we're going to have a look at. Different ways to measure customer satisfaction. Another key measure, obviously, for the whole business. You could use CSAT, customer satisfaction score. So this is a customer satisfaction score, is how satisfied are the customer with what we're producing. So that would typically be survey based. Net promoter scores, NPS, many organizations use NPS nowadays. In essence, what you do is you ask people, either your customers or people in the organization or whoever you're trying to run NPS against, what they think of what you're doing. So for example, RadTac, we do NPS on our training. So we ask all people who have had our training, would they promote us? Would they recommend RadTac to other people? And then what you look at is obviously who are your detractors, and if there's people who say, no, I wouldn't, who are your promoters, etc., etc. I can't remember, I think RadTax is 75 or something like that for training. It's very, very high anyway. 70 is world-class organisation. So NPS is a good thing to look at, customer satisfaction. And then CARES, customer effort score. Customer effort score is much more about how easy is it for the customer to talk to us. Yes. So, you know, marketing automation systems here. How easy is it for the customer to find information about us, and how likely is it they're getting the right message? So again, that would typically be survey based, but we need some sort of customer satisfaction. DevOps Health Radar, I would suggest you to have a look at. Again, it's something from the Scaled Agile Framework. And also, as we're talking about business agility, yeah, again, RadTac have loads of these, but you know, you can have a look at the safe one, which is open source. Yeah, it's the ability to self-assess your business for business agility. You know, are we using things like customer centricity and design thinking? Have we got DevOps and continuous delivery pipelines in place? Do we coordinate trainers and suppliers? So obviously the map, the spider diagram we can see here, you know, how agile are we? Where are our strength areas? Where are the areas we need to have some work in? And yes, we can think about continuously transforming using that measure as a baseline. So the last thing I'd like to say, really, as we really come to the end of this, is that we need to have balanced metrics. So we're going to have metrics related to teams, we're going to have metrics related to the organization, metrics related to programs and portfolios, quality metrics, speed metrics, predictability metrics, cycle time, lead time, takt time. So we've talked about, as usual on these webinars, we've talked about a lot of stuff that we haven't spent a huge amount of time on, but hopefully it's piqued your interest to go out to the market and have a look at what's available. So just to close out, as usual, yes, RadTac is the company that I'm from. We do training, learning and development, very high NPS scores on that. We provide consultancy and coaching to help organizations transform, and we provide exemplar practitioners. So we provide teams of people, agile teams, or we provide experts, scrum masters, product owners, agile architects, agile developers, etc., etc., etc. So anybody you would need to develop anything within the organization or act as catalysts, exemplars within the organization to create catalytical change. Many organizations do that with us. So they'll take on a few RadTac teams and then use those as examples of, hey, look, this is how we work in a business agility way. It's a very powerful thing for an organization. Yeah, RadTac training portfolio, yeah, world class. We're around the world. We work with small organizations, medium sized, but we've also done some of, if not the biggest agile training rollouts, consultancy rollouts across the world, because we are based around the world. So that brings us to the end of what we're going to be talking about. As I say, the next one is going to be about transformation, so a bit more about specifically how you would transformation to business agility. However, that's going to be towards the end of September because I'm on holiday. Woohoo! Yeah, I'm on holiday in about 2 weeks for about 3 weeks. So I'll just stop sharing here. And once again, if anybody has any questions or comments or observations, please put them on chat.